volatile and competitive,
Right. Sorry.
and it's stressful. And like I said, I took over and I advanced because my boss had a mild heart attack and retired early, and so I was like, "There's a pattern here." So I started getting back into running more seriously when I was around 40, for that reason. But then what happened is that I found that the running helped me balance out the stress of Wall Street and corporate life. And I think a lot of people are like this. That's what running is there for. Because, as human beings, we evolved to live in the forest,
Hmm.
full mind body engagement in a difficult, physical environment. And when you sit behind a desk, some people do well with that, but many of us struggle. And so the running became my balance. And then I got to a point where, in my mid 50s, I suddenly felt this need for more and more nature, even though I had been running for years at that point. And that's when I sort of started to go off a little bit more of the deep end in terms of, barefoot and peak bagging and things like that. But here's the thing, James, I'm still in the corporate world.
Hmm.
So I had this, people know I'm a little bit quirky on the outside of work, and I wear my shoes to work. That's the only place I really wear my shoes now, for the
Yeah.
most part, unless it's really cold out. So I'm still in the corporate world, so I'm still playing the game where I can be really productive in a corporate digital ecosystem kind of environment.
Mhm.
But that can't be my whole life. That's not sustainable. So I have this huge hunger to be out in the forests and the mountains in a very natural state. And I'm really in this situation where I need both.
Beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. So when did your like desire and interest and actually like did you start off wearing barefoot shoes, barefoot footwear initially, and then did you transition to being, fully barefoot?
Well, let me tell you how the transition started, and then I can tell you, now I can look back even to when I was young and talk about maybe how I was set up for this.
Hmm.
But you remember Chris McDougall's book, Born to Run, I think it was published in 2009, and all my friends sent me copies of it. They're like, you got to read this. And his thesis was that shoes are great, but they can predispose runners to injury by ever so slightly altering, our natural gait, right? With the cushion, the arch support, the structure, et cetera.
Hmm.
So I decided to experiment and I went for like 100-yard barefoot jog on a trail. And
Okay.
the light bulb really went off. I was like, wow, this is really different because I've got to aim my feet. It's not just pounding, I've got to place
Hmm.
them. And I realized that my whole body was starting to turn into the shock absorber. So it was a very, very impactful experience. And then I put my shoes back on and I was like, whoa, I can't feel the ground anymore. What happened?
Hmm.
But I didn't go barefoot at that point. I said, look, I'm going to go down the path of minimalist shoes. And so I got into minimalist shoes. And I had been wearing conventional shoes with orthotic arch supports for years. So I threw that stuff out and I got these thin minimalist shoes. And I could hardly walk at first.
Yeah.
But deep down, I realized that this was going to be better for me, or at least that was my bet. And it was only about 5 years later that I tried a barefoot run again, thinking it was time just to update the experience
Mm.
in the experiment. And I went for a mile run, and this was in New York City on a trail around the reservoir. And my feet got a little bit scratched up, and I was self-conscious, and I was like, that was a total meh. But the next morning when I woke up, my feet were like tingling,
Mm.
and it was clear that they wanted more texture and impression
Right.
and sensation. And very quickly, I lost interest in shoes. Like almost immediately, I became totally obsessed with going barefoot. And so today, yeah, for the most part, like I think in 2025, I did one race in shoes.
Wow. That's
And
super
that's about it.
inspiring.
Almost everything else the whole year has been barefoot.
That's awesome. And are you doing most of your running on like trail on kind of soft surfaces like grass or fields or like pavement, concrete?
Pavement, mostly
I'm
pavement. And the
serious.
reason is the trails, if they're soft, are wonderful. But in
Mm.
the Northeast, the trails can be very rocky. And I was just out in Arizona. They can be very rocky everywhere. I can't really, to be honest, I can't really run on, a trail of jumbled rocks. And I didn't even like doing that much. To be honest, I was a mediocre trail runner, even in shoes. There are some people who can run a little bit on rocky trails. I think most people would just settle down and walk, and that's what I do. If it's rocky, I'll just walk.
Right, yeah. Yeah, it's so true. Like our
But
feet
on
actually
roads, yeah, yeah, on a smooth surface, I just hit my PR a few weeks ago at a race. I did 74 miles. Okay, and it was just a paved sidewalk. It was a loop type race. We had 24 hours. By the way, doing 74 miles in 24 hours is nothing to brag about. But that was my longest barefoot run, and my feet were fine throughout the whole thing. It's just the rest of me is not in great ultra shape at this point. So I got to do better, and I'm going to hopefully go out to do another of those races in maybe in February.
wow, that's really something else. Yeah, because I think we underestimate like the capabilities and like what our feet can actually bear. And obviously, when we're like in footwear for years of our life and never go barefoot, those capabilities and strength atrophy, right? And yeah, it's wild to think that our
Oh
feet
yeah,
actually have more receptors, nerve endings than our hands. So like it's kind of like going around the world
yeah,
with like a rubber glove on, and you could only imagine how that would impact your sense of like dexterity
yeah,
and your felt sense of things and able to literally
absolutely.
do things, right? So yeah, I've dabbled in a bit of barefoot running. We have this really it's kind of like a pilgrimage back home in Ireland. It's called Patrick. I went up there once barefoot, and similar
Huh.
to what I heard you writing about, like every step, you become very mindful of where you're stepping, and you have to be very
Yeah,
light-footed, and you get so much more data and information
yeah.
back from your environment, and it's almost like kind of like a meditative experience. And yeah, that's something I wanted to ask you. When you're out there doing these like superhuman long runs, are you like listening to stuff? You know, where is your attention at those times?
Yeah, I don't listen to anything. My attention is on what I'm doing, right? And that's even in shoes, if I was running in shoes or back when I was running in shoes. So I'm paying attention to what I'm doing. When I'm running, for example, I'm constantly scanning my body, thinking about alignment, posture. Is there a little bit of tightness in one muscle or another muscle? How is my overall energy level? Am I thirsty? Do I need water or calories? So I pay attention to what I'm doing because I'm out there, and then this is back to we were talking about the military. It's back to that mission mindset. I'm out on an operation. I've got a mission, simple mission. Just get myself from start to finish.
Mhm.
But I might want to do it at a certain pace, or I might have to deal with the terrain or whatever it is. And I want to accomplish that mission and show myself that I can still execute. So I'm paying attention to what I'm doing.
No, no, beautiful, yeah. Because a lot of times when I go for a run, actually, like sometimes it's so unpleasant. Like I've been doing this, like trying to get under 20 minutes for 5K, and I'll like listen to like heavy,
Yeah.
intense music to literally try to distract me from the pain that I'm
Yeah.
experiencing.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's another thing trying to like just be with the
Well,
sensations.
the risk with music is if it's, upbeat music, it can make you go faster. If it's downbeat, it can make you go slower. But pacing is one of the key skill sets
Mm,
for, competitive racing.
right.
So I'm very focused on pacing. Like if I'm doing a 5K, and I love doing 5Ks,
Mm,
and I'm trying to get back under 20 minutes, but it's
mm,
been a while. Um, and I'm running at 100% I mean, I did a 5K a couple of years ago, barefoot on a flat course, and that was where I set my barefoot PR. And there's this guy in front of me,
mm.
and he looked like he was my age group. And I was trying to catch him. I was running so hard, I was practically in tears.
This was on
I was,
concrete
I was,
then, was it?
oh yeah, yeah, but a smooth course, a smooth course.
Right.
Um, I couldn't quite catch him. But when I'm running hard in a 5K, like I'm making judgment calls on pacing. Like there's a hill up ahead. And I'm thinking through, okay, do I charge up the hill or do I back off, get up the hill, and then charge over the top? These are intuitive calls, but the pacing, is really, really important to, you've got that intuitive sense of your energy and the stress on your muscles, and you're just trying to manage yourself through that kind of environment and make the best decisions you can.
Yeah, sure. And when you're doing these really long distance runs, are you like nasal breathing? Are you paying attention to like your breaths per minute? Are you like clued into your your breathing?
Sometimes, and people have made there's the great book you're probably referring to what's the book called, Breathe or Breath,
Yeah.
and the fellow references Native American tribes and how they taught their kids. So, for example, Apache dads would make their kids take a mouthful of water
Mm,
and run
yeah.
up to the top of a hill and then spit it out
Hmm.
to force nasal breathing. They understood how important nasal breathing is. So I do pay attention to it sometimes. And sometimes I'm just gasping through air through my mouth. It depends on what's going on.
Right, I see. Okay. Yeah, and just on the breath, do you do any like breathing exercises or like Wim Hof breathing on a daily basis, or do you have any like breath work practices?
I have experimented with that stuff. I do not do it currently on a daily basis, but I have definitely put some time into both Wim Hof, some of his breathing exercises, as well as just working on breath holds. So I think I've held my breath for as long as, 3 minutes or something. Um, but I'm not currently doing that. It's hard to do everything.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I know you talked about before that you do the cold exposure. Is that something you
hmm
do on a daily basis or?
Again, not on a daily basis, but like when I go to the gym, I always finish up with a cold shower. Now, I haven't been to the gym almost at all this year because I made the decision I really wanted to be outdoors. So I've
Beautiful.
been, every available minute has been outdoors rather than indoors. But yeah, uh, when I was working on a hiking project a few years back, and by the way, it's the subject of the book I mentioned to you, Chasing the Grid. I had to do a lot of winter climbs, and I found the winter, sort of weighing on my spirits.
Mm.
I'm somebody probably like most of us. I like a bright sunny day, and right now it's gray and dismal outside, and
Yeah,
it's
same
it's
here.
dismotivating. So I felt like I needed to push back. I need to regain my sort of my fighting spirit. So I started doing some Wim Hof protocols, some simple stuff. Like I would go out for a hike without a shirt, and it
Mm.
might be 30 degrees. I even did it, in the 20s and in the teens. And, maybe for varying durations, right? So if it was in the 30s, I might be out all day. If it was in the teens, maybe it was 3 or 4 miles, and then I put a jacket and warm stuff back on. But the purpose of that was to differentiate between discomfort and real risk. And what's really interesting about the cold, and this is Wim Hof's thesis, the cold is bracing and it brings forth, a response from your body. And so if you do something like going shirtless outdoors, it's very energizing, up to the point where it starts, it can become debilitating, obviously.
Hmm.
And it's interesting, Native Americans often wore trout pants, but not, they often went shirtless. And I don't know if maybe just living closer to nature, they were more attuned to this thought that if you expose your body, you get the response of strength and energy. Whereas if you shield your body, you start to lose strength and energy, right? So it's another modality for that sort of idea.
Yeah, totally. I think it's called like hormesis, like kind of pushing your body, like positive stress on the body that your body kind of
hmm
makes adaptations and kind of grows because it's like
Exactly.
forced to handle these uncomfortable situations.
That's right. And like I meet a lot of people on the trails and they're like, "Oh my God, you're barefoot. I can't even walk barefoot in my living room." I'm
Yes.
like, that's not good.
Yeah, it's so
But
funny.
hormesis is a great concept, and Nassim Taleb uses hormesis as the basis for his concept of anti-fragility.
Mm,
And so it's exactly right. The dose makes the poison. So if you expose yourself to some stresses, you'll call forth the strength of your body. If you shield yourself from stresses, those strengths will atrophy.
for sure. Yeah, talking about stress, I mean, you mentioned just there that you did over 70 miles in 24 hours. So like
Yeah.
what's your mindset and attitude and like how do you when you hit the proverbial wall and your body and everything is screaming at you telling you to stop, we've had enough for today, well, how do you overcome that and just keep putting one foot in front of the other and push yourself through these things that, for somebody like me seem like incredible superhuman feats.
Well, there's a couple things, and there's a lot of choices out there. So one of the things is you choose the goals that are truly exciting to you. So a number of years ago, I ran the Badwater Ultramarathon in Death Valley, and for whatever reason, it caught my attention, and I just thought it would be the craziest thing to be able to run through the desert heat. So I spent, a couple of years training for it, and it was a really big deal for me. And so having the right goals, that creates a huge amount of energy. Um, But I also want to caveat, sometimes your body is right. It says, dude, you just broke something, you better stop. And so you may have to listen. But I think having the right goals and having a strategy and a plan is key. And then what we're trying to do in these situations is learn to manage ourselves through what I call high stress regimes. And where you've got anxiety, you've got stress, and it's true for running, it's true for driving race cars or flying fighter jets, right? And lots of things in life. You've got to, we all know that we've got to be able to manage ourselves. We've got to stay on target, on mission, despite anxiety, stress, confusion, distractions, surprises. Part of it is preparation. So when I went out a few years ago back to Death Valley and I ran a Badwater double. So that's 290 4 miles from Badwater Basin up to the summit of Mount Whitney and back. And that was about 4 days of running with almost no break. And so part of how I did that is by having a really good plan. So I'd been out there before. And so I had, target paces for different parts of the course. I had an idea of how to get through the course. Um, the second thing that helped me get through that environment was having a support crew. So other people can really help you. And like a lot of these long races, you have pacers. And those pacers get out in front of you and they're running, and you look at them and you say, if they're going to run, I'm going to run. And then finally, I think we build mental strength over time, which is the ability to turn off the alarm signal for better or
Mm,
for worse. And that just takes I don't think it's any different from weightlifting. You build the mental strength to make the effort to turn off, the complaint and keep moving. And that's a judgment call. And we go out and we do these races just to practice and get better at that. Now,
right.
here's the good thing. If
Mm,
you complete an event, whether it's 294 miles or 74 miles or 5K or whatever it is, you get to the end of it, you get to say, I did it.
mm,
And that's self-empowerment. And a lot of people talk about, hey, you got to be confident. Look at Michael Jordan, he's confident. Well, there's a reason he's confident. It's because he's good.
mm,
Right? You and I and everybody else, we've got to build our confidence based on reality by doing things. And so you do that 5K, and you say, I did it, and you learn that you can manage yourself in a high stress regime and keep going and stay on plan. And that's where the real runner's high comes from. It's that self-empowerment and that self-confidence. And
right.
that
Yeah,
spreads throughout your whole life.
for sure. Yeah, you're kind of fueling yourself by like thinking about how would I feel if I actually stopped now and I went home and I quit now. So you're just kind of like
Yeah.
pushing yourself to be like, if I quit now, it'll be eternal, but
Yeah,
I can keep going, right?
exactly. Yeah. By the way, I did that once. I was doing a 100-mile race in Vermont, and this was back in my shoe days. I was wearing shoes, but it wasn't going
Mm,
well. And I was talking to the race director, and I was like, I'm not having a good night. I think I'm going to check out. He's like, Ken, just sit by the fire for a little bit, have a hamburger. He got me a hamburger from the grill. It was way overcooked and almost inedible. And
right.
I thought to myself, I could quit now, but what am I going to do? I'm in Pittsfield, Vermont. Like, go find a Holiday Inn or something. And, I didn't drive all the way up to Vermont to spend the night in a Holiday Inn in Pittsfield. So I said, why don't I just go back out there? Because there's no better place to be right now. And so that's the kind of attitude that develops over time and with experience. The ability to not cut yourself off, but realize that those sources of comfort are not what define your life. So I remember I used to say, hey, if I finish this hike or I finish this run, I'm going to go get a slice of pizza and a beer. And which is, that's legitimate. It's a way to reward yourself for
Hmm.
getting to the end. one day I realized, hey, it's not about the beer. It's not about the pizza. It's about being out here and moving and doing things. And so that was a point I just got to over many years from practice. And that's why we do all these things to practice and get better.
Hmm. Beautiful, yeah. And do you find, I know there's this kind of pop science rule about like the 40% rule. I don't, not sure if there's any credence to it, but like when you hit a wall, when your body and mind is telling you, I'm done
Uh-huh.
now, you're actually at only 40% capacity of what you can ultimately, achieve. Have you found that given all your like history of being?
That sounds like David Goggins. That's David. I think that's David Goggins. And here's I don't know. Like, I tried to do the David Goggins pull-up challenge, which is 100 pull-ups straight. And most of us can't do that, right? But he set a world record for pull-ups. He's a
Hmm.
pull-up specialist. And the point is, you do 10, and then you stop and you shake out your arms.
Hmm.
And then you do five. You stop and shake out your arms, and you do two. And then if you have to keep doing one or two, you can keep doing that all day and get to the 100 if that's what it takes. Now, there's a risk to that. See this elbow right here? It's sore right now. You can get
Okay.
tendonitis from doing too much. So I wouldn't go with I wouldn't go with those kinds of rules. I would just learn, when you're young, what you're trying to do is figure out where are those real limits, where I start breaking things. Where's the difference between, pain and discomfort and real damage to myself? And you're young, you don't know. Like when I started out, I'd never heard of people running 100 miles. That was crazy.
Mm.
But I
Mm.
learned I could do that and more without damaging myself. As you get older, the equation changes because those limits are getting more real and moving in. So that's why I would just adopt, say, for young people, get out there, be aggressive, and learn and see what you can do.
Right, totally, yeah. And I think you're known within the kind of ultramarathon circles, Ken, for being like very low risk, low injury, like injury prevention. And do you think like the barefoot running really is integral to you just avoiding injury and setbacks?
Well, I started out, I've had every conceivable injury that there is almost at this point. But I do think the barefoot is good. I think it's really good. So I'm 62 now and I'm still, running well. And I
Mm.
feel really loose and fluid. And, if you go on Facebook and look at the 60 plus, running groups, it's all about injuries
Mm.
and other health problems. So, what barefoot does is it restores your natural alignment. Now, I have had a couple of injuries while barefoot. It's not going to make you bulletproof because the other source of injury is just trying hard, trying to do things, trying to win the race or set the PR or whatever. So risk is inescapable, but yeah, many fewer injuries in barefoot for sure.
Right.
And actually in the book is about injuries, and I had injuries from, you know, sloppy alignment from years of wearing shoes. So
Right.
I am definitely a believer that barefoot for not, I can't say for everybody, but for many people is going to be much more healthful and much lower risk.
Yeah, because you can't really heel strike when you're barefoot. You kind of have to land almost like on the
Well,
balls of the earth.
actually you can. Actually you can.
Okay.
That's the heel strike forefoot is like the newbies approach to barefoot. That's Chris McDougall. That's not the way the real gurus of the sport talk. Like if you look up Ken Bob Saxton,
Hmm.
he's one of the real OG barefoot runners. Um, and he says, look, he doesn't really pay attention to heel or forefoot foot. I did a video of myself on a treadmill and I showed myself running forefoot and heel strike. And I actually feel more comfortable with a very subtle heel strike.
Interesting.
Um, but here's the real key to all of this. You got to have core engagement, right? And if you don't have core engagement, and you're not going to in a sedentary lifestyle shod environment, or you might have very weak, everybody's different, but you run the risk of having very weak core engagement, then you can't do anything really safely.
Right.
Yeah, but Yeah, I feel that that's barefoot has taught me core engagement. And when I was a kid, I had terrible posture and chronic shin splints. And, we had gym class every day in recess and we ran around in the neighborhood the way the kids I don't think do much anymore.
Mhm.
But even then, sitting all day and wearing, shoes with big squishy heels, I think it really set me up poorly
Mm.
as a young person. And I've been spending years trying to correct for that. Now, some people adapt naturally to, and are great athletes and adapt naturally to shoes. So it's not necessarily the same for everybody, but I think shoes can definitely set people up for injury problems.
Yeah. And do you think, like, as a general like rule of thumb, like barefoot shoes are for everyone? Like, how do you? What I usually say to people, like, I'll suggest, like, just get one pair of barefoot shoes, like, walk around in them for a bit and see how it goes. Because for me, I made the transition about like 7 or 8 years ago,
Mhm.
and I've never looked back. I don't want to get conventional footwear, but at times I've had to wear conventional footwear, like when I play golf, I have golf shoes, and it just seems like so wrong when I'm so confined and not able to move
Yeah.
properly. But like if you were to make a sales pitch, Ken, for people about
Mhm.
barefoot shoes who might have been wearing conventional shoes their entire life, what would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I could point to a number of physical therapists uh, who advocate for minimalist shoes, whether Jay DeSherry or Christine Hoffman in Denver or Irene Davis. These are doctors and physical therapists. And I would hesitate to offer medical advice, but my sense, or Dan Lieberman, at Harvard talking
Mm,
about, how the body functions. I would say probably minimalist shoes are a better bet for most people, because they give you more ground feel and less unnecessary support. Um, I would also say that you might need to take some time to transition. It
yeah,
took me 5 years. And of course, I was starting around age 45.
right.
So depending on how old you are, but it took me 5 years to transition. And here's the funny thing, James. When I first put on, I used to love Innovate minimalist shoes. When I first put them on, I could hardly walk down the sidewalk. It was back to the heel thing.
Mm,
I couldn't walk on my heels because there wasn't enough cushion. So I ended up walking on the front of my feet,
mm,
which is a little bit unnatural. And I found my calves were just on fire
mm,
because wearing conventional shoes, those heels shift the load onto your shins, and that's why I had chronic shin problems as a kid because I
right.
had sneakers with big heels. But the transition, you want to give yourself time because you've got ligaments and tendons, and asking them to move an extra millimeter doesn't seem like a lot, but they're not that flexible.
Mm,
And so you might need to give yourself, don't go to zero drop immediately. Maybe go to go from 12-meter stack to 4 millimeters or something, right? Give yourself some time because you are asking your body to change. And the risk is, you put this load back on the calf, and that creates risk for the Achilles tendon and the posterior tibialis tendon. In my book, by the way, it tells the story of my posterior tibialis tendon, which went through a 2 year cycle of being really, really unhappy to the point I could even hardly hike. Um,
Pictures.
and I think that's one of the consequences of a rapid transition. And
Right.
plus bad alignment dating back from years and shoes. Now, the good news is today it's 100% healed and no issue anymore. But, the transition is something to be thoughtful about.
So take it slow and
Now,
get some
here's
get
here's
some
a caveat.
advice.
We're talking
Yeah.
about, yeah, um, we're talking about running. Like if you want to start barefoot hiking, right? Can be a quicker
Mm,
transition.
yeah.
I've done a lot of barefoot workshops, and I think going out on a slow-paced hike in the mountains is something that people can do more quickly than just jumping into barefoot running
Yeah,
because
totally.
there's less stress when you move slowly at a walking pace than when you're running.
Yeah. Because like walking is, I guess, the micro scale of running, right? So if you can walk comfortably barefoot, then maybe you can go for a jog and maybe, pick up pace, go for
Yeah.
sprints. So yeah, take it easy.
And that's what I did it because I started thinking more seriously about barefoot running because I was injured. And I was like, I'm getting injured now. So I need to start thinking more about natural form.
Oh,
And I
interesting.
was like, well, barefoot running sounds hard, particularly when I'm dealing with these injuries. Why don't I just go for a hike? And so it was an easy way to start to become more acquainted with the natural form without taking on the stress of actually running. And
Yeah.
here's the other thing that people don't talk about. The PTs, the doctors, the scientists, they don't talk about this and they totally miss it. The real reason to go barefoot is because it's more fun. And it's exactly like what you were saying, James. It turns you back into an animal prowling through the forest. And you have the sensations and the mindfulness and the alertness and the awareness. And you get all this information from your feet and you feel connected with the forest instead of just tramping through it. So I really, and I find, by the way, and people love to talk about grounding, and grounding can be very controversial. But even walking down a sidewalk or in a grocery store or in a coffee shop, the barefoot practice connects you to the environment, makes you mindful. And to me, it's just pure fun. And unless it's cold or I don't play golf, I do go to the climbing gym. And so I wear shoes on the climbing gym.
Okay.
Unless there's some specific reason to use the shoe technology, I definitely prefer not to.
Yeah, likewise. Yeah, I remember when I made the transition initially, like I was in a city and I put on these Vivo barefoots, and I remember the sensation of walking over. So in Ireland, at the sidewalks, the zebra crossing, we have like I think it's for blind people. They have these kind of like half cylinder balls actually on the pavement
Huh?
just to let them know, okay, this is a zebra
Huh.
crossing. And just the feedback that I was getting on them because it was an uneven surface
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
otherwise would have been completely oblivious to if I just stayed in my, conventional runners. But one thing I wanted to ask you, Ken, actually, do you favor any brand in the from barefoot shoes? Like I have Zero, I really like Zero, but I know there's loads out there. Is there anyone that you favor?
I've used Zero and I've used Luna sandals and I've used Vivo Barefoot for like work shoes. Today, my favorite is a brand out of Poland called Tadivo.
Oh, okay. A Devo.
And so that's what I choose to wear. I have no relationship with them. I pay full retail for what I buy from them.
Hmm.
Tadivo, very lightweight, very flat, very unstructured. They're like moccasins, really. And I love them. And I can run in them and I can walk around at work in them. I can
Oh,
wear them anywhere. So, and I like them more because I always get tangled up with sandals with the straps. So this Tadivos I can just pull on or pull off. So they're easy to get into and out of.
okay, beautiful. Yeah, something just came to me. I remember ages ago, Ido Portal saying like about our feet. Our feet are naturally high tech, but when you put them into high tech footwear, they become low tech. So I guess our feet are naturally super high tech,
Yeah.
capable of so much, mobility, dynamism, strength that when you
Yeah.
put them in these footwear, they just kind of like becomes rigid and atrophies. So for me, it just made sense to get barefoot shoes and to just do what your feet naturally want to do, right?
And
Yes.
that's the theme that pulls together a lot of what we've been talking about, because the human body is the apex of 4 billion years of evolution
Hmm.
on Earth. We are the apex predator. We're the most advanced living creature there is. And so the feet are marvelous mechanisms. And we can go outdoors in the cold and warm ourselves, right? And if we have to hold our breath, we were talking about breath work, we know how to breathe and we can hold our breath and dive for minutes, right? So we have tremendous capabilities. And the downside to technology is exactly that. Technology produces great productivity gains, but there's always a cost. And the cost is you rely on it, you become dependent on it, and you lose the inner strengths that people once had. And so I think a lot of our sports and recreational activities are just about using the body the way it was designed or evolved to operate and not turning into total digital operators, right? You go to work, you sit in front of a computer, you come home, you dial up Netflix or something, you have a totally sedentary, passive life. You can do great things and make money and make the world a more organized place, but you're losing part of life. And the thing is that nature gives us energy to operate our bodies. And a lot of that energy comes in the form of joy and excitement and enthusiasm and exhilaration. And you lose that and you end up with a very stale, monotonous existence. And that's the downside of civilization and modernity and technology.
Mm. Yeah, you.
Why not try to have the best of both worlds, is the goal.
Yeah. Yeah, you wrote a lovely piece on technology actually that I read yesterday, Ken, just about like how it's just so prevalent in our life and it's kind of like, reducing our attentional capacities, our problem solving abilities, our
Mhm.
creativity. And like what's your relationship like with your smartphone and how do you kind of minimize your screen time? Or is that something that you even feel the need to do or
So I spend a lot of time connected because, first as a writer, I'm always curious and reading and researching, and that includes social media and seeing what people are thinking. And at work, I'm in spreadsheets and PowerPoint and conference calls.
right?
Um, so I do a lot of it, but as a result, I have this huge hunger to get outdoors and be natural.
Mm,
And so, yeah, I don't respond to I use my phone when I'm outdoors to navigate, right?
mm,
But I'm outdoors and my feet take over. And I turn myself back into, an original animal just
mhm,
prowling through the forest. And I have a huge appetite for that. And it's growing. You'd think at age 62 that I could just chill and put my feet up and hang out on the screens all day and drink
mhm.
martinis or whatever. No, I have to keep moving through the forests. And I was just in Arizona for a few days, and it was just so empowering and so beautiful to be out in that natural terrain. I cannot, and I need more of it maybe as I get older.
Well, it sounds like you're only getting going. It's really inspirational.
Yeah, it took a while.
Yeah, yeah. I from just doing a bit of research, did you like design a race that like people have to get through this trail without the use of a compass or any navigational like kind of signs? And I'm really interested in that because like people's sense of direction and ability to navigate is kind of like almost redundant in today's world. And just yeah, tell me more about that.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do direct a race. It's called the SRT, which is short for Shawangunk Ridge Trail. It's here in upstate New York in the Shawangunk Mountains in September. And it's not that complicated. And in fact, it is a mix of technology, honestly, but it's a 70-mile race. And we have shorter divisions too. We have a 30-mile and a half marathon version. But for the 70-mile, none of those races, we don't mark the course.
Mm,
Typically on a trail race, people will tie, yellow engineer tape on the branches so the runners can see where they're going and just focus on running. We don't do that here. So we give you an app, which is like Google Maps, so you can see if you're on the right trail. And the trail, it's a little bit confusing because it hopscotches across a network of trails and the blazes change colors and the name of the trail changes a little bit. But as a result, it creates this additional cognitive load. You've got to pay attention to where you are. And if you read some of the race reports, they're hysterical because people are, when they're running hard too, when you're running hard, it's hard to make, navigational decisions. It's hard to stop and pull out your phone and look at it. And so people go off course and get lost. And we have, search and rescue teams to go find them. Um,
right.
and we also don't give people, there's no aid. Bring your own food, bring a water filter, manage yourself through the forest. So it's a little bit old school in that regards. But it requires more mindfulness and more ability to manage yourself, almost like you were out on your own, versus being part of a race where all you have to do is follow the color tape in front of you.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Yeah. Because it's not a skill that we really have to use anymore, like, finding our way around the place. And, there's obviously GPS maps there always whenever you're lost, but people
Yeah.
don't really have that feeling or sensation of being lost. So I'd say it's fun.
Oh, yeah, that's a vanishing skill. One of the things I do is bushwhacking. So some of the peak bagging projects I've undertaken in New York, some of the peaks don't have official trails. So you have to navigate through the forest. And that's a skill I developed in the Army. And this, as we were talking,
Mm,
that was a long time ago before GPS. So it was
mm,
all map and compass.
mm,
But there's an exercise you can do, which is called natural navigation. And that consists of, maybe you'll study the map beforehand to form a sense of where you're going, but then you get to the forest and you put the map and the GPS and the compass in your backpack for safety in case you get really confused. But
right.
otherwise, you're finding your way through the forest by observing. And it's a totally lost skill, except for bushwhackers and other people who are out navigating off trail. But it's a beautiful skill because you realize all of a sudden that you can understand the lay of the land and you can
Mm,
see subtle changes in the light and you realize you're on a ridge or not on a ridge. These are heavily forested areas. It's not like, in Colorado where you can see 50 miles.
mm,
You might be able to see 50 feet, right? It's like being in the jungle
I
almost. And
see.
so it requires the ability to really notice subtle indicators. And that's part of connection. That's part of understanding your environment and being part of it so that you can move through it. And if you get really confused, you pull your GPS out of your pack, or you do it with friends. It's a great exercise with friends. And then you look you look at each other and you say, "We're lost. We have no idea where we are." We did that once, and we were going to we were going to follow the sun, but it was raining. So
Right.
we went uphill, and instead of going this way, we went that way. But we figured it out, and it was a great learning experience.
No, that's beautiful. Yeah, it just forces you to get out of your head and like be present and pay attention to your environment because that's integral to you finding your ultimate destination, right? So that's super cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Ken, talk to me about a few non-negotiable like self-care practices that you do on a daily basis, be it like stretching or meditation or journaling. Is there anything that you do to keep your body and mental headspace like in prime condition?
In terms of self-care, I don't really do a lot. I don't really do a lot of stretching. I think that's one of the benefits of barefoot running. It keeps your alignment more natural, and stretching isn't as necessary. I do a few body weight exercises, mostly to keep good back posture. Because if I don't do that, I'll have lower back stress.
Okay.
But otherwise, I would say, I focus on sleep. As I get older, sleep is super important.
Hmm.
Um, I try to get outdoors. Like I try to do, in theory, 2 hours of working out a day.
Wow.
Although that 2 hours could be mostly just walks. Okay, it does not, or it could be things like shooting some bow and arrows, or arrows out of a bow in the backyard. Just something to get out from behind the computer, something that uses some part of your body. It could be some light, body weight exercises. It could be going to the gym. And I don't always accomplish that. But then on the weekends, I'll go out for much longer. I do intermittent fasting on a very prescribed basis,
Okay.
and I'm very careful about my diet.
Hmm.
So that would be my regimen. And also, I don't do the cold exposure all the time, but like I don't use air conditioning and I don't use much
Right.
heat in my house. I'm in New York. Like if I lived in, Phoenix, I might have a different approach. It doesn't get that hot in New York, but in the winter, the thermostat is set at 50 degrees
Okay.
Fahrenheit. So if I get cold, and I wear a jacket, I might wear long johns, and if I get cold, I can build a fire in the fireplace. But I have this feeling like winter is supposed to be cold and to always be shielded and always going through life in a controlled environment is very unappealing to me. I'd rather suffer a little bit with a little bit of discomfort in the winter, and then when the spring comes around, then I really appreciate the ability to sit outside in the sun and just soak it in and enjoy.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I guess having it so cold in your house and stuff, it keeps your metabolism like ticking over and it keeps
Yeah.
gives you
Yeah.
energy, like surprisingly enough. Yeah. Yeah. So tell me more about the intermittent
That's
fasting.
right.
Do you,
And
sorry, go ahead.
mhm. Oh, I was just going to say, one way to get really cold is to sit in a recliner all day. So get up, go for a walk, just do some household chores, get the heart rate going, and then I'm not at 40 degrees or 30 degrees. And then it's tolerable.
No,
So
for
you were,
sure.
James, you were asking about intermittent fasting?
Yeah, do you follow like the 16-8 kind of um period that the 16 hours not eating, 8 hours eating?
Sort of. I have my own protocol, and a lot of it is 16 hours. 16 is the minimum for me. So
Okay.
I count 16 hours or longer as a fast. And that basically means just skipping breakfast. And
Mm,
so I track this in my training log. I have a requirement to do 150 to 200 hours of fasting a month. And so that could be 10 times 16 hours. So it's basically like 10 times during the month, I'm going to skip breakfast. All right.
hmm.
That's not really that big of a deal. Once during the month, I have to do a minimum 30-hour fast.
Oh.
So that's, obviously a full day without food. And that's it. And I would say typically on the weekends, I'm not eating, I'm going dinner to dinner just because for me, if I get out and do a hike or a run and I'm moving, I'm okay for the whole day without food. And the 30-hour fast, typically that's when I'm traveling, is I pick times to do that. And it might go 36 hours. Once it went 48 hours.
Mm.
So, and it was a great experience because I went out on a business trip and I didn't want to eat airport food. And then I didn't want to eat the boxed lunch in a hotel, conference. And then I
Mm.
didn't want to eat airport food on the way back. So it was 48 hours without food. Like, okay, big deal. But the great thing about fasting, the great thing about it is it builds your confidence to walk past bad options. That makes it worthwhile, whatever you think of the science. And the be back to Hormesis and Nassim Taleb's concept of anti-fragility. Too much regularity can potentially breed weakness. If you read history, our ancestors didn't always have stuff to eat. No animals do. So it's more natural for us to not have perfect regularity in our food.
No, totally. Yeah. And when I used to like look at fasting and stuff like that, you think about back in the day, Hunter, like when they may have went days without food,
Hmm.
like they would actually have
Yep.
heightened sense of awareness and attention and focus
Yep.
because they obviously they're hunting food, right? So yeah, we evolved from like
Absolutely.
feast and famine kind of environment. Yeah.
Yeah, there's this letter I read, from the 1850s, and this group of white farmers were out with a band of Shoshone Indians on a hunting trip, and they didn't find any animals for a couple days.
Hmm.
And the farmers, the white guys, were in tears. They were starving.
Right.
Now, again, they're farmers. They're used to 3 square meals a day. But they observed the Indians didn't seem inconvenienced at all. They
Mm.
just sat around and sang songs and didn't seem to be bothered at all. So I think in a more natural environment, people were used to going a few days without food.
Yeah. I
And
think like
that's who we are. And but by the way, I the when I go hiking, I'm typically fasted in a hike when I'm hiking. Okay.
oh,
So I typically don't eat when I go out. And so, yeah, I'm paying attention to the leaves, the flowers, the birds. If I see an animal, it's very interesting to me. So I think the fasting creates this real attention and it creates a lot of energy, although, it makes me feel very conservative and methodical. Like I'm not
mm,
going to waste energy,
yeah.
but I have a lot of clarity and energy. So
Because
it's very consistent, I think, with what you've been reading and experiencing yourself.
yeah, because consuming food, like really, like even just like healthy foods, be it, it takes a lot of energy to digest. You know what I mean? And that energy is being poured from your like mental capacities also. So yeah, fasting kind of like really kind of makes you like primed, your senses heightened. So
Yeah.
and when you're eating, do you like follow your macros or do you kind of just like calories or how does that work? Because it sounds like you're in ketosis for a lot of the time.
Well, I love what they've just done to the food pyramid. I think they turned it upside down.
I've seen that.
In my 40s, it was starting to become apparent. It was the start of the obesity crisis for the
Mhm.
country. If you go back to like the 80s or something or the 90s. And it was starting to become apparent. And somebody showed me a book called The Zone Diet. And I recall it very specifically. And really, all they were suggesting was cutting back on carbs.
Mm.
So more fat. Um, maybe more protein. And, I think the carbs is where a lot of the risk is because these are highly processed carbs. They're highly glycemic, so they shoot up your blood sugar very quickly.
Mm.
Um, and they're engineered to be, appeal to our taste for sweets. And I have a huge sweet tooth, so
Mm.
I love sweets. So I'll start today. I'll start with protein, and then I want protein and fat and a minimal amount of carbs. So I'll have some fruit or some vegetables. Mostly, I'm trying to eat whole foods. So I eat a lot of meat. I eat a lot of cheese. The only carbs I buy are I do get crackers for the cheese,
Crackers.
and then it's fruits and vegetables. So that's my personal approach. But it's a
Okay.
tricky subject because the science is terrible. The science
Yeah.
is basically marketing for giant food companies. And we're all different. Our
Yeah.
ancestors were so finely attuned to their environment. We're not, because our environment's changing and we're all mixed from different backgrounds. So I think everybody's got to go out N equals one and test and learn and figure out um, what works for them.
Totally. I think
Don't let a
self-experimentation
doctor.
is the way to go because you don't know what kind of fuel source you might do best off. So the only way is to kind of to see what works
That's
for
right.
you. Yeah.
Exactly.
So, I'm curious, Ken, as well, because you're obviously like into the barefoot movement and barefoot walking. Do you do a lot of like
Mhm.
squatting and like hanging from a bar? Do you do these kind of natural movements and like do you spend a lot of time on the floor when you're eating your food? Do you like, you know, like try to have minimal f furniture?
No, but I think that's interesting.
Mm,
And because Dan Lieberman, if you read his book Exercise, he's an evolutionary scientist at Harvard, and he points out that hunter-gatherer tribes like the Hazara and others, who they study extensively,
mm,
they're sedentary too. I mean, the men are doing 8 to 10 miles a day, but that could be 3 or 4 hours, and they're spending a lot of time sitting around.
mm,
But the difference is they don't have chairs.
yeah,
Okay, so they're not sitting in the same position for hours on end. They're squatting or they're lying or they're crouching, and therefore they're shifting around and moving a lot.
yeah.
And so I think your suggestion about this movement to start getting rid of furniture, I haven't really done that, but I think it's interesting. And you're sort of inspiring me to maybe try that a little bit.
Yeah, because that's one thing I noticed when I tried to like not like sit as often. I would like, lie on the floor watching TV and eating. And you notice like every 10 or 15 minutes you have to change your posture because you're getting a cramp and a
Yeah,
build up. But when you're sitting down
yeah,
in these like really
yeah.
comfortable chairs and sofas, you're just sinking into them and like, it's probably not great for hours and years putting your body in that compromised position, right?
James, I think you're exactly right, and I do that. I have a recliner, and I'm guilty of that. But I travel a lot too. So on an airplane seat, you're locked in, dude, right? And
Yeah.
car seats, I think that's a source of a lot of. I have a sensitive. I've always had a sensitive lower back, and I'm more conscious now of how much effort it takes to keep my spine in a neutral position when I'm locked into a car or airplane seat. So I like what you're talking about. You're inspiring me to see if I can do a little bit of experimentation.
Nice one. Yeah, it's kind of unavoidable as well as you said, like airplanes and car seats and stuff like that. So yeah, try to get as
Yeah.
much downtime
Or
as
at
possible.
work, right? Like if you have a meeting in a conference room at work and you're the only one lying on the carpet, that would be a little odd. But
Yeah,
but I think there's a lot to what you're saying.
no, for sure. Yeah, last question I'll actually ask you, Ken. If you could whisper in the ear of your 30-year-old self, what would you say?
Well, as I saw somebody ask me that the other day, and I thought about it, and I have the benefit of hindsight. I would say, dude, just go out and do it. Just keep doing it. Don't let an old person tell you what to do, but just keep doing, pushing, learning. And I'm here, so I happen to know that whatever you did worked out well.
Right.
But I think action, I'm a big believer. Identity politics is so important today. I'm not into being, I'm into doing. So I'd encourage the younger version of myself or other young people, just do something and you'll learn and you'll move on from there. It's that simple. Don't give up. Keep trying.
Love it. That's wonderful advice. Yeah, Ken, it's been super fun talking to you. You're some boy. It's amazing the whole barefoot the movement, and you're really pioneering it, and really an inspiration, to be honest. And yeah, to tell me where people can find out more about you, and your blogs and your books and stuff.
So, James, first of all, thank you for having me on your show, and I've been delighted by our conversation. If you want to connect with me, www.barefootken.com. And as I mentioned, I've got this book out, Chasing the Grid, which is about a lot of my adventures, and it includes stories about how I first got into barefoot hiking and running. And you can find information about the book on my website, and I've got a blog, and you can find it on the website as well. And you're well, please reach out and connect to me through that website if I can help you or your listeners in any way.
Awesome. No, I really appreciate it. And
And
actually, what are you
welcome.
preparing for at the moment? Do you have a race upcoming that you're
So I
training for?
talked about the 74 miles I did in a 24-hour race, and I was very careful to say that's not good enough because I had done a 70-mile race in 24 hours. And I was like, okay. And that was the first long run I had done in several years. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna go back and do 100 because 100 miles in 24 hours is sort of the basic standard. So I went out and from 70, I improved to 74. And now I'm like, huh, it's going to take more to get back to 100 than maybe I thought. So I'm going back out in February and I'm going to keep working to see if I can get back to 100 miles barefoot in 24 hours. The other thing I'm doing, James, I've got a multi-year project, and that's another subject in my book. So a lot of times we have this A race that we kill ourselves to do, and that's great. But a multi-year project is another kind of structure, and I've
Hmm.
got a goal to climb 1,000 mountains barefoot before I'm too old,
Okay.
or as long, but before I'm no longer around. I'm at 603. I was just out in the
Oh.
Phoenix area and did some fun hikes. So I love that project because I'm always thinking, can I get out to the mountains? Either one's nearby, or can I travel somewhere and
Hmm.
do another hike? And again, I'm not going to finish that this year or even next year. That's a multi-year project. Those are my two main focuses right now.
Awesome. Well, yeah, you should come over to Ireland, and we've some lovely mountains
I'd
over
love
there. You,
to.
you can walk barefoot.
All right. Well, I'll take you up on that one of these days.
Yeah,
I would love to
awesome.
do that.
Ken, I really appreciate your time. I know you've a flight to catch, so yeah, all the best, man. And I'm gonna keep
Thank you,
following you,
James.
bro. Okay.
Okay. Thank you,
Peace,
sir.
my
Have a great
friend.
day.
Ciao.
Yeah. Bye-bye.